Joanne and I just recorded a couple of moments and then we realized we weren't recording and now we are. So hi, Joanne.
Hi, Amie. How are you?
I am doing well. So what we were saying is, Joanne and I have known each other for a little while. Right now she's deeply involved in Athletes' Voices and we'll get to that, but her career, extremely impressive, progressive career working, in high-level organizations like the 49ers and the Golden State Warriors and being involved with Special Olympics. There's so many things I want to touch on with you. But high level, what I really love about your work is there's a very clear theme and there's a very clear mission. And so I want to jump into all of that today. And I also mentioned, and we were laughing, you're a mom, you have 2 children.
I do, yes.
You're dialing in today from Tahoe.
I am from the floor of a condo where I could actually get decent lighting and the right height. So this fireplace behind me is actually real. I don't know that it works, but it's real. So here I am from Lake Tahoe. Got both kids dropped off to ski today. They are super excited to have a great day on the slopes. And I am super excited for a quiet condo where I can get some work done and also feel like I'm giving my kids all the best experiences they can have at the same time.
It's the story of life as a parent,
Yes.
isn't it? A working parent.
It is.
And it's funny, like over the past year, every time I speak to you, you're not in a different place every time, right? But you have a lot of mobility and the pandemic has proven that we can do what we do from almost anywhere, even if we have dogs in the room or children getting injured
I would
outside.
never have a dog in the room ever. No, I mean, it's been, in some ways, it's been freeing. I feel like I am a more involved parent and a more involved executive with the ability to do my work from wherever I happen to be. And it's days like this. I wouldn't have imagined a few years ago that I would have been at Super Bowl last week doing a zillion events, flown back up from LA, unpacked, repacked, jumped in a car, and been working from Tahoe all this week while my kids skied. But it's what we get to do. And I'm really grateful for the mobility and the flexibility. And in fact, even Amie, at the beginning, as we were trying to talk, my Wi-Fi was not spectacular, but we have the tools now to make sure I have my Verizon hotspot. And so I pulled that out and now here we are. And it's, as a parent and as an executive, to be able to do all these things and feel like I'm present for my kids at the same time, it's pretty special. And it's very different than what it was like for my parents when I was growing up.
Right. And it's even, really different than it was 2 years ago. Some of the silver linings of what we've all been dealing with and all the change and constant shifts and, sort of what's happening today and what are we, what's happening in the schools and, all that stuff. I think everyone's become not everyone, but, we've become very resilient as humans. And to your point, I mean, podcasts used to be done in person, right? Sitting across the table, which by the way, sounds lovely right now.
It does.
It sounds so lovely. But, we learned quickly, like, okay, we can produce content remotely. We can work with people that are anywhere, in the world really, and be productive. Our kids are getting to see that resilience and understand that the world is not a small place. And so it's, for all it is, there are positives. And of course, talking to you is always a positive highlight of my week.
As it is for mine. And it's funny because I think I often forget that we aren't in the same room. And there was that one day when you had a bottle of water on your desk and it looked just like my bottle of water. And I actually thought that you were grabbing my bottle of water. And I had to remind myself that you're in Philadelphia and I'm in San Jose. And we definitely are not able to exist in that world. But, it was interesting. Last week during Super Bowl, I was a part of the first ever charitable fundraising event done entirely in the metaverse. And it was sponsored by Meta/Facebook. We had Oculus devices and we had 150 people gathered in a room as avatars. And it was awesome. Like, it was so weird, but also so cool. And one of the elements that I really appreciated about this event was that it was a really casual environment to just go up and talk to whoever was in the room. So our MC was Rob Lowe, and it was no big deal to just walk up and be like, Rob, you did a great intro. And he's like, thanks, that's great. And really, it's red curly haired Joanne avatar talking to, dashingly handsome Rob Lowe avatar, but we were having a real human-like conversation. So, and we also raised millions of dollars. And so again, bringing together interesting people from all over the world to talk about topics that are crucial and important in today's world, but doing so without the traditional barriers to engagement. So anybody could have joined, and Meta donated all the Oculus devices. So we were able to have people who wouldn't be able to pay thousands of dollars or travel to Super Bowl for an event or find a hotel, who were able to be a part of something that was a game changer for so many people. And that was with the Giving Back Fund, a really innovative donor advised fund program that's based out of Los Angeles.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, so which part of your world was this for? So I'm not surprised that you were at the Super Bowl. That doesn't surprise me at all.
Although I left
But I
before
was
the
like, okay, but
game.
what segment?
Yeah.
What segment of your world was this? So that?
I'm on the board of the Giving Back Fund. It's an organization that provides fiscal sponsorship to hundreds and hundreds of individuals, usually high-profile influencers, entertainers, athletes, and others who are looking to be able to make a difference in the world of philanthropy, but who are not at the stage where it makes sense for them to create their own 501c3. So we give them the backing and the structure to be able to do that, so that they can go out and do the great work without needing to worry about the legal ramifications of lack of compliance. So I'm a big fan of the work that they do. And every single year for the last, I think 10 years, this would have been the 10th, at Super Bowl, they've done an event called Big Game, Big Give. But this year made the prudent decision to take it virtual and wanted to do something unique. And so that's how we landed on the metaverse. But it was fun because I was able to bring a few of my clients who are part of their donor advised fund strategy at Giving Back Fund into the event. And they had a blast as well. And out of it, one of my clients and a dear, dear friend is a humanitarian and actress named Annalyn McCord. And Annalyn does a lot of work to bring visibility to human trafficking. Annalyn joined me in the metaverse, and now we're ideating on how we can help increase visibility for the challenges that girls in Cambodia are facing by leveraging the virtual world and actually giving people a chance to dive into it and experience it in a way that you couldn't before. So I would much rather be sitting in a room, crisscross on your sofa, talking to you as your daughters run in and out of the room and having a cup of tea. But in this current state of the world, I don't know that I ever would have met you or been able to become your friend had it not been for the world of Zoom and the pandemic bringing us together. So that's how I look at it. I still have my friends in the real world. I have friends in the Zoom world, and now I'm making new friends in the meta world.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about, joining you in the metaverse. I want to learn more about that offline. And it sounds like an incredible event that you guys put on. As you talk, I always think to myself, if I could spend a day inside your brain, it's like the things that come out, it's all there. There's so much knowledge. There's so much experience in doing what you do, right? And we'll get to your company that you founded a few years ago. But another thing I wanted to talk about, because it's timely and it's occurring today, one of the sessions is occurring today, is athletes' voices. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit about this initiative, the need it fills, the mission, the product, maybe some of the results, and how this fits into your overall business at Oliver Rose.
Sure. So Athletes Voices is a program that's underneath the umbrella of Oliver Rose, but it is affiliated as a nonprofit organization. We seek to amplify athletes' voices so that they can influence greater change throughout the world. It originated because I was at the San Francisco 49ers during the infamous season when social justice took center stage. And my dear friends, Colin Kaepernick, Eric Reed, Eli Harold, were taking a knee, and people noticed that they were standing for something, but the articulation of what they were standing for was often lost in translation. I went on to the Golden State Warriors soon after and saw a similar challenge there, where the NBA was so forward thinking in how they were approaching issues around social justice, but yet still so much was misunderstood. So during a really unique convening in Rome, with 200 leaders in sports, it was brought together by the Pope at the Vatican. It sounds really highfalutin, but really it was this crazy coming together of events. It was 3.5 days, and it feels like it was 3 months, because I developed friendships and collaborations there that I think will go on for the rest of my career and hopefully my life. But while we were there, we were talking about how sports was serving humanity and how we could do things in a more meaningful, focused manner. And that was the origination of Athletes' Voices over a glass of wine at a cafe in Rome. That sounds very romantic, but of course there we were talking about my favorite subject, which is social justice in sports. And so we launched 2 years ago. We are tonight hosting our, let's see, what number is this? 13th webinar. We have approached a wide variety of topics, everything from K through 12 education and play equity to mental health, wellness. Tonight we're talking about sobriety, as well as addiction and the role that sports plays in both creating and resolving addiction. The approach to all of this, however, is to showcase that athletes can and should be able to use their voices to speak up and speak out on any topic that they find compelling and where they feel like they have a story to share. And so this will be culminating with a convening in late April in the Santa Cruz Mountains, where we'll bring together 50 athletes to help them build out their playbooks to increase their amplification of their voices around social justice. So it started, like I said, it started as a conversation, but I'm kind of in awe myself when I sit back and go, wow, look at what we've done. We also currently have 25 undergraduate students serving as fellows. They represent colleges from throughout the US, and about 60% of them are from historically Black colleges and universities. And you see about 20% represent Ivy Leagues and everything in between. And so it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. And something really struck me that really stood out with what you just said, right? And you and I have talked a lot about this, but in this particular lens, you said, athletes' voices founded over a glass of wine at a cafe in Rome, which I might add, stuck with me. It sounds lovely.
It does, doesn't it?
When an athlete takes a stand, and you cited an example, it might not necessarily be crystal clear that, we know they're standing for something,
Mhm.
but to the general public, what does that mean? You said sometimes things get lost in translation. An athlete standing up for something or being the face of something. How does your work with Athletes' Voices, and then also with your company, Oliver Rose, bring clarity to that question for athletes? Because I think that's probably something that comes up a lot, but also something that it might inhibit an athlete from taking a stand. If I go public with this, what does that say about me? What happens
potential negative
afterward?
ramifications?
Right.
Well, Amie, it's interesting, is we've talked about this a lot, but I have 2 rocking chairs on my front porch, and I have a pretty open door policy. And some of the most amazing conversations have happened even during the pandemic, just sitting out there on my porch, talking to athletes, whether it's in person or whether we're talking via Zoom. But these are real conversations. These are deep conversations where we're not just doing a plug and play or assuming that because an athlete has a certain background that they want to talk about a certain topic. It's asking the questions, it's treating each individual as an individual, with different life experiences and different objectives. And some of the athletes I work with are much more gregarious. They are very outspoken, want to be in the public forum. Others really are more reticent to get out there and do public speaking or to be out in front of an issue, but would rather work behind the scenes. And this program and this philosophy is about bringing out the best in whatever that individual athlete seeks to accomplish. Let's get behind them and give them the tools they need to not only feel confident, but be successful in that initiative. And so we come up with all different techniques. It's interesting. I'm wearing this fan band. This is actually a Patrick Willis, the Winkers Mind Youth Fund fan band. And one of the things I love about these is that this is a way for us to communicate with people. You wear one and you share one. You take your phone and you tap on it, and it takes you to the Winkers Mind website, where we can have it pointing to different initiatives or objectives based on whatever the time of year is or whatever Patrick would like to convey at that particular time. And this is a great way for him to be able to share a message with a larger group of people without standing on the stage and doing that. So we meet them where they are. We help them travel to where they'd like to be, and we don't pressure them to do things that don't feel right. And then I go back to what are the assumptions that we all make when we see somebody and we assume that they're going to speak about something. One of my favorite Athletes' Voices moments was when Alexandra Rickham, an Olympian from the UK and originally from Jamaica, spoke on our panel about environmental awareness because she has a passion for the ocean, saving the ocean. She won a silver medal in the Olympics for sailing, but she's also a tetraplegic and uses a wheelchair. But that had nothing to do with the conversation that we had on the webinar. What we were talking about was environmentalism and her love of the ocean. And it sounds ridiculous to say that that's somehow a breakthrough, but it was saying to Alexandra, what are the topics that you care most about? And how do we put your message out there in a way where people can hear it?
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think the one thing too is you're building a community with Athletes' Voices, showcasing that you're not alone when you share your voice. There are other people that can sit beside you, that can contribute to the conversation. I mean, when you look at what you're doing later today with the addiction and recovery panel, I actually registered for that because I was like, well,
thank you.
This really sounds incredibly interesting from the lens of the sports industry and the athlete and how these topics impact athletes wherever they are in their journey. You kind of, in my head, I go to like after they're done, or before they start, or, even at the high school level, like how does sports impact, the addiction and recovery landscape? What is the trajectory of an athlete versus a non-athlete, and successfully avoiding those situations? And how does it, and those are really vulnerable topics to discuss. And so I think it's really incredible and powerful to bring those topics to the forefront. So I'd love to hear some of the other topics that you guys tackle and, what else is coming this year with Athletes' Voices?
Yeah. I mean, this one, it's interesting because the three athletes who are speaking on the panel are all in recovery.
Okay.
And so their stories are extremely personal. And I will tell you, this is probably the most difficult one I've experienced the recruitment effort around because the topic is so personal. But our next one is actually on the role of sports in intercepting the pipeline to prison. So we're looking at just vulnerability in our youth and how getting them involved with sports can actually support their journey to take a different path than the one that may have been predicted for them based on the situation or circumstances surrounding their birth. So we'll have a few athletes on that one who either were a part of some sort of activity that could have resulted in them being incarcerated, or who had siblings or parents or others involved and were successful in avoiding or evading that for one reason or another. But we're also looking at mental health. And then on lighter topic, youth leadership. What
Mhm.
does it look like when youth stand up and say, I'm the captain of my team? How does that parlay itself into them becoming leaders within industry? We're going to break down that belief that sports create leaders, and instead look at it from the perspective of sports cultivates leaders. And so I mean, we try not to focus in on one particular subset on any of our topics. So it won't be, today we're talking about women's history and women in sports. It's through the lens of all these different vantage points. How do we approach addiction and recovery? How do we approach mental health and wellness? And it looks different. So, as part of that, I think it's crucial to recognize that we are trying to reflect the diversity within sports as well, with actual sports. So one of
Right.
my favorite components about Athletes' Voices is that we have a Paralympic fencer and we have an NFL superstar, and they can engage in conversation together. I love that you use the word community. We think of it as a community or a family where it's a really safe space, but it's also a place where you'll meet people you wouldn't have met otherwise. And perhaps you can find ways to lean in and amplify what they're doing, and vice versa. And we also focus in on athletes having specificity around the topics that they're most engaged with, so that they can become truly subject matter experts known for that topic, can lean into it, and can partner up with nonprofits doing great work in that space and corporates that are funding work in that space, and focus really concretely on one thing. And then throughout our Athlete Voices Network, they'll be able to refer organizations that come to them with a topic that isn't within their tight circle of influence to another athlete who may be more involved with that particular topic. So it's exciting to see those connections being made. And I honestly, I can't wait for our April convening, because I know that the best conversations, just like the one in Rome with the glass of wine, often happen around the fire pit or in between sessions or while waiting in line to get, your coffee in the morning.
Yeah, and I think what you're creating is a lot of light bulb moments for more athletes to say, I heard such and such athlete talking about this topic, and it was really eye-opening for me. And maybe this is something that I really care about because it resonated with me for whatever reason. I never thought about this. I never thought about getting involved with this. So it definitely has a major connection to your overall strategy, which, is connecting, and in one part connecting athletes with brands and corporations to create sustainable impact. Before we jump to that, I wanted to also mention the timely topic of name, image, and likeness,
Mhm.
which, is a high buzz level topic happening around collegiate athletes, allowing them to take endorsements, allowing them to get involved with brands and corporations. I was curious from your lens, right, with social impact, cause marketing. What do you think the outlook is here with the NIL and athletes partnering with brands at the college level? Are you seeing any cause marketing stuff come out of this? Like, what's the outlook here?
Ooh, I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous about it because I think that the younger stage at which an athlete is being given the pressure to perform and to meet expectations around a sponsor commitment or obligation, the more difficult it is for them to regulate how they're growing up and what that collegiate or even high school experience looks like. I'm nervous because I also think that there aren't enough controls in place to ensure that the athletes, particularly those in less visible sports or with less maturity or on the younger side, are entering into deals in a way that enables them to grow and be flexible as they get older. There are definitely some great stories out there where athletes have been able to take advantage of marketing, sponsorships, and other engagements to fund projects for themselves, and even in some cases to fund charitable initiatives. But it makes me nervous. And like I'm the mother of two athletic obsessed kids. And on the one hand, my daughter is a modern pentathlete, which is such an obscure sport. but she loves it, and she's the reigning national champion. And when she first started training, this sport is really expensive. And I was very nervous about anything she would be given for free, because it might compromise her eligibility for NCAA. She'd like to fence at the NCAA level. And then when this change occurred, I found myself going, well, now I can put something on her website that says, hey, if you, again, my daughter doesn't have the financial need. We would love to support the sport in general. But then I thought, what kind of pressure am I putting on her if all of a sudden there's, Harmless Harvest, great Kira Barton, brought to you by Harmless Harvest. Like, she's still in middle school. That's one of the topics we'll be talking about tonight with the substance abuse, and the fact that the vast majority of the addiction, we're not talking about performance enhancing drugs here. We're talking about opioids. So I have injured myself. I need to get back into my sport. If I don't get back into my sport, I'm going to be replaced by somebody younger, faster, more agile, and less injured than me. So what do I do to mask the pain to enable me to get back on, in my case, the ice, but the field, the turf, whatever that sport is that you're doing. And how is that pressure increased when you have a college scholarship, or you have a brand that's paying for your collegiate experience or supporting you, and you injure yourself? And do you now at 18, 19, 20 years old find yourself pushing through an injury that you shouldn't be pushing through because of the pressures you're receiving externally, because of all the people now relying on you? Which, by the way, is one of the biggest challenges when you look at economic solvency for athletes long-term. Even the most successful, financially successful athletes struggle. And it's not really because they bought a fancy car, or they built a music studio in their house. They mostly, these high profile guys and women, have the ability to do that financially. It's all the people who come up to them with their hands out and say, I need you, you owe me, I need this from you. And the pressures that I've seen a lot of NFL athletes under because of family coming to them and saying, this is what you owe me, I think will just be exacerbated if it starts at the college level. So yeah. I'm concerned. That's in summary, I guess.
Right. And it's valid. I think a lot of people share this sentiment. You mentioned, there aren't enough controls on it. I think we'll start to see that come out. We're in what we always call the Wild West of this moment right now. There are certainly concerns about it. And I agree with you, the pressure on the athlete to keep everyone happy when they have finals to study for and papers to write and a diploma to get, right?
Well, and that's going to go by the wayside. I mean, we're seeing it already. And I don't want my daughter to be concerned about creating the TikTok video that she's been committed to versus diving in and learning and having a real college experience. But I also don't know if this is just a natural evolution. As a mom, I get worried because I think about how our kids already have to grow up too fast. And does this just speed it up even more?
Right.
Think about Monet Davis, for example, the baseball phenom, who was, what was she, like 13 or something when she was pitching in Little League World Series? And she was actually able to go back and be a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old and go to prom and do things. And she had a lot more scrutiny on her, and she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, but she still got to be a teenager. And, but on the other hand, I also understand that sports are expensive. And so there are a lot of layers to it. And I think we also need to solve the recreational versus comp sports problem that we have in this country right now, and start creating better pathways for kids to participate in sports for the mental health and physical health benefits, as opposed for the competitive advantages or the acquisition of wealth at a younger age, because they've specialized so young that they're really good at something before they even get out of middle school.
Right. I mean, there's the pure aspect of recreation and competition and fitness and exercise that we don't want to get lost. And fun and friends. I look back on my athletic career, and what it always is that's where my friends were.
Yep.
And we had so much fun, and there's nothing like the bond of a sports team. There's nothing like that fun and that, easy.
Like play croquet, like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Um, like I remember the thing that helped me adjust socially when I moved cross country. I was originally from Washington, D.C. area and then moved to California. Felt like a complete fish out of water, like just as any pre-teenage girl does. But I found handball. It's like the most, it didn't exist in my community in Maryland. Like nobody played that. But in Northern California, it was the thing to do when you were 12 years old. So I made friends and I had fun and I did that at recess. And I still was a competitive figure skater and I was doing all these things that were very intense with my sport. But during recess, I could have fun. And I wasn't worried, by the way, about injuring myself and therefore compromising my ability to compete in figure skating. And
make
I
money.
mean, that's very, very timely in so many different ways.
Right.
But like literally this morning, as I'm dropping my daughter off to ski for, I think it's day 4 of skiing, and she has a big competition coming up, and she's like, well, Mom, I'm going to take it easy today. And I was like, just have fun. Like, go ski. You're
Yeah.
in middle school. Just ski. Have fun. Don't worry
Right.
about it.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love the perspective. And you're 100% right. There's so many layers of that conversation. We're at the tip of the iceberg here. Obviously, there's excitement around it from the athlete's perspective, but also as parents and, administrators and business people, there have to be checks and balances. So yeah, we'll talk about this again in a year and we'll see how it's got some of the early results at that point, where it's going, what kind of rules and checks and balances they've put on it. Should be interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So into your leadership journey, we're talking about all the things that you're doing now with your company, Oliver Rose. And, I pulled out your LinkedIn headline because you know me, I love words.
Yeah.
I love
We
positioning.
share that in common.
Yeah. And so you have, in your headline, sports for social responsibility and social justice, executive advocate, amplifying impact and inspiring change, strategy partner for philanthropic athletes. And so my question is, why do you think you've landed where you've landed? Right at the intersection of sports and social impact, and who or what has inspired you to go all in on this? Because you're all in.
I'm all in. Yes. Wow, that's a good question that I haven't been asked quite like that before, but the answer is actually really obvious to me. It has always been about words and recognizing that I was given a gift of being able to articulate things. I'm fortunate to have been raised by a mother who's a librarian, and my grandpa was a librarian, and my sister's a librarian. So there's words everywhere. I was also raised by an incredible dad who really looked at things as possibilities and opportunities, not barriers. He had grown up surrounded by things that could have been construed as barriers, but he looked at it instead as, this is my journey and I'm going to forge ahead and reach back behind to help those who are coming up behind me. I love languages. I love working with people. I love finding out their stories, but I also really enjoy the process of figuring out how one story can actually influence the future of another person. So it goes back to Special Olympics and starting off as a volunteer coach for Special Olympics figure skating when I was 14, and recognizing that sports brought me together with a girl my age who had all the same interests as me, music and whatever, Tiffany's perfume and things like that. Not Tiffany's big blue and white box, Tiffany's like the singer from the 80s. Yeah, I think it was called Teen Spirit or something. That's a real thing. Yeah. But we connected because of our similarities and because we both love the feeling of putting on our skates and getting on the ice. Now, my friend had Down syndrome and I do not. And so we would joke that we were practically the same. She just had a bonus gene. And but the challenge was that sometimes her voice would get muted. And the same thing when I was in law school and I was working in a workers' rights clinic, and I was using my ability to speak Spanish to help to write letters on behalf of individuals who had worked incredibly hard as in a day job, maybe as a landscaper or in a construction role, and then we're told they weren't going to be paid. And we, just by using a little bit of law school knowledge and some linguistic abilities, were able to write letters that could ultimately help their families to survive, which is like, it's pretty heady to think about it that way. So I guess I look at it as, if you have the ability to sit down and talk to people and help them to feel comfortable sharing their stories, and then you can bring that together in a way where it's packaged so that the athletes aren't just finding a better pathway forward for themselves, but they're also creating opportunity and optimism for the youth. Because, Amie, we've talked about this a bunch of times, whether we like it or not, our kids look up to athletes. Athletes are role models. So I often ask this question of athletes I'm working with is, do you feel like athletes have an obligation to speak up or speak out on issues of social justice? Do you think athletes have an obligation to give back to the community and to do service? And the answers are interesting because they'll always say, well, yeah, okay, but what does that mean? Like, I get it, it's the right thing to do. But how do we do it? Not just the right thing to do, but in a way where it actually creates momentum and influence around a cause, so that the young person who is perhaps lacking in optimism about their future, who sees the barriers instead of the opportunities, now, because they can relate to this athlete on a personal level, not just as a hero, but as somebody who's also fallible and has challenges in front of them as well, or had challenges in front of them, now we're building something forward. So I think, for me, it's just really about matching the athlete, the cause, the funding source, and then creating the right message. And I believe that the impact, this is actually the tagline for Athletes' Voices, but when athletes use their voices, the impact is exponential. I can say something, you can say something, some people will hear us, but I know for a fact that when an athlete shares something on social media or otherwise, that ears are more open and people are more receptive to the message. And so I go back to do athletes have an obligation? They don't have an obligation, but what a lost opportunity if they don't use their platform in a way that creates a path forward for others.
Right. And they are a major distribution channel. Mm-hmm. So in any media, I've worked in media for a long time. It doesn't matter if it's a league or a team or a media company like NBC Sports. We all know that a message isn't heard unless it's distributed across a major channel. And what we've learned, what we always knew, but with the access that athletes have to communicate directly with their audiences across social, now each individual athlete is a major distribution channel. And then if you combine them with like what you're doing with Athletes' Voices, it's amplified, it's exponential in its impact, and it's really incredible. And so you founded your company, Oliver Rose, in 2020.
January 2020.
January 2020. And what really kind of inspired you to do that? Because you have very unique, specific experience running foundations at the highest level in sports with the 49ers, with the Golden State Warriors. You have a lot of experience under your belt, but you just you told the story. I mean, a combination of your skills, your natural skills and abilities, your experience, your passions, and we talk about ikigai, right? But yes, everything comes together for what you're doing now. But what was the moment in time where you decided to go all in with Oliver Rose?
Life hits you sometimes, it's, I keep in mind, I launched my company about 8 weeks before the pandemic set in, and
convenient.
Yeah, I know. Here I am working from home, and hey, everybody's working from home. This is great. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning of our conversation here today. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I'm all these different things. I'm also a very enthusiastic professional. I love work and I love what I do, but I needed to be in a place and a space where I felt like I was leaning into what my true skill sets were and using as much energy as possible to further those objectives. In 2020, my father was well into a journey through younger onset Alzheimer's disease, and it was heartbreaking, devastating, impossible to wrap my head around. And I felt a little bit lost. I felt like he had always been a guidepost for me. And while I still would sit with him and hold his hand and be there, and I really honestly didn't care that he had no idea who I was. In fact, even pretty far into his disease, he would say something when I'd show up like, "Oh, look, it's somebody I love." And that was kind of enough for me. But I also realized that I was bifurcating my energy in such a way in doing all the different things and traveling around and commuting and trying to complete more than I was capable of in one day, which is a lot for me to say because I'm not much for sleep and I tend to keep on going. But I also had this realization that, my dad at 63, when he started to become symptomatic, was at an incredible high in his career and doing things that he had dreamed he'd be able to do one day if he worked hard enough and found financial security. And yet here this disease intercepted his ability to do all that he was meant to do. And I just took a step back and I said, if I have a finite amount of time and I have an opportunity to make an influence and to use my skills and to do the things that I love, and I'm blessed enough to have built up some financial security through all the hard work over the years, I'd be remiss in not doing it. So it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be, because I felt like I might crack if I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost my dad exactly a year later. And in the middle of the height of the pandemic in Los Angeles, going down to see him, to try to be there for his last moments, I said this to him out loud, which is, I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to do the things that you always wanted to do, but didn't have the time to do. I just have to get started earlier. Yeah. And because my dad opened so many doors for me, and my dad was committed to, he had to find people to pay for his education. So my brother and sister and I were all given our educational opportunities through our dad's hard work. I knew that I got a head start and I wasn't going to let that go. So, I guess the message to others is, first of all, like, obviously cherish the time, but also when you're given a head start, own it, admit it, and go do something with it. Because if you just sort of relax and rest through it, no, so that was a very dramatic answer, but it's true. He's top of mind. He's in my dreams all the time. He still gives me advice, but he's not physically here. And I'm honored to be able to take some of his genetic material and move forward with it.
I love that you said what you said to him. That's a moment. It's like, imagine a world where you hadn't communicated that. I love that you did that. That really strikes me. And that you're, like you said, you're getting started earlier. And look at all that you've already done, right? And in 2 years of Oliver Rose and everything that you've done before that.
Well, Amie, not to interrupt you here, but it reminds me. So I turned 48 in about 6 weeks, I guess. But when I turned 45, my son was like 9 at the time, and he's like, "Mom, you're halfway to 90." And he's a very charming kid. Like, he can talk his way in and out of anything.
Yeah.
Right. So he goes, "Mom, you're halfway to 90." And I'm like, "Reed, seriously, like that?" And he goes, "No, Mom, what I mean is look at all you've already accomplished. And you were a kid for a lot of that. And I'm like, you're right. Like it was this moment of like, when I looked at it through his eyes, he was saying to me, Mom, you were in school till, I mean, I went through law school. I was in school till I was 25. And then, okay, yeah, I've done a few things in 20 years. And then he goes, and Mom, you're a grown up now and you get to do anything you want for the next 45 years. Like, yes. And so I think about that a lot. Like, Mom, you're halfway to 90, but look at all you've accomplished. And the funny thing is that it can take a 9-year-old to remind us of that. And I know you have a few of those running around your house. So,
Yes.
it's just, we get caught up in what we're supposed to have accomplished already versus looking backwards and saying, what have I done and how do I build on that? And I say that to athletes too. I think there's this massive emotional transition that happens when your athletic career is ending and you're trying to figure out what's next. And one of the goals with Athletes' Voices and with Oliver Rose is to identify with athletes what their next step is, and not to say to them, throw away the playbook of the first half of your life, but instead, what are the skills that you learned? What are the moments that you've experienced and the stories that you had to tell that you can harness and then leverage to build out that next step? So don't throw it away and call yourself a former athlete. Look at it and say, I'm once an athlete, always an athlete, and these skills that I have obtained can carry me through to the next stage.
Right. I actually sat through a presentation, I think it was A-Rod, with Adweek, and he gave that same really great advice. Everything that you've done is not to be thrown away. Just because you won't be competing on the pitch or the ice or whatever it is, it doesn't mean it's gone. You're pivoting into the next thing. So take it all with you, right? And then to your point and your mission, figure out your purpose and what you're going to do with all these gifts that you've been given, because you're not coming to a cliff. You're just coming to a fork.
And I know, and it's funny because I did have somebody who was in a supervisory role for me a number of years ago said something to me about throw away your playbook, go burn that playbook and just start fresh. And I thought, like, for a moment, I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then I was like, no, that absolutely doesn't make sense. Like, when we talk about authenticity and being who we are, like, okay, here I am. I come with all of these moments. It's kind of like the freckles on my face. Each one is a moment when I maybe didn't apply sunblock as well as I should have, but they're all adventures, right? And I mean, and I might try to cover them up with makeup or whatever, but in the end, it's part of, it's my wrinkles, my freckles, they're all part of my life experiences. And I don't know. I mean, people talk about them with stretch marks too, right, Amie? So,
Well, there's that.
like, yeah, I'm like,
I like the freckles better, Joanne.
Yeah, I do too. Freckles are kind of cute. Like,
that's more fun. I have many freckles, many freckles. And
I remember reading Freckle Juice when I was little and like trying lemon, but whatever. And then my son has a face filled with freckles and I love them. Like when he was really little, I used to say, okay, before you go to bed, we're going to count all your freckles. And then of course he'd fall asleep. But I just thought to myself, like, I hope that he has a life filled with moments that create more wrinkles, more freckles, more life, and not a sheltered life. And so, yeah, I've never said that before, but I think I'm going to use that going forward.
I'm loving it. With
athletes, it's also like we mark time and injuries too. But my injuries that I experienced I was a competitive figure skater and I experienced all the injuries. I can remember what I was doing when I sustained each of those injuries. It's not always a horrible thing. I was trying a new move. I was distracted by something, like whatever it was. It's like, okay, that's another life experience.
Right. Yeah. I love the freckles metaphor. This was so you just uncovered this new amazing metaphor during our conversation, just totally off the cuff. I love that so much. And And I love that you mentioned the competitive figure skating. I mean, I definitely wanted to bring that up. Clearly, I mean, a sport like that, which, as you and I mentioned earlier, is upon us right now, and with the Olympics that's happening, and there's a ton going on with figure skating. Even, to this day, there's been headlines coming out about things happening in Olympic figure skating. And I think what I wrote down here with regard to figure skating, I mean, the discipline, the commitment to that sport, which is not a mainstream Big Four US sport. It's all the same, the athletes, the mindset is all the same. And I'd love to hear, if you have time, a little bit about your experience as a competitive figure skater, and maybe some stories. I know you have some really good ones. I've heard a couple of them,
Right.
of how that has led into where you are today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'll go back a little bit to the leaders are born and then cultivated. And, for me, I think my background and experience with figure skating helped me to find my voice and helped me to realize my own strength. I mean, I was a pretty tiny little kid. I was in a bad car accident when I was 5. That car accident left me with more limited use of my right arm and prohibited me from doing certain sports. But through figure skating, I discovered what I was capable of doing and what was possible. And I felt stronger and more powerful, but I also learned how to stand up in front of a crowd and perform, and that when they call your name, you have to be ready to step on the ice. You can't be like, oh, sorry, I need another 5 minutes. Like it's that always ready, always on component that I also believed has helped me navigate some crisis situations. In fact, it's interesting. I was in an Uber the other day in LA with one of my clients. We were heading from NFL honors to some other charitable event, and our Uber was rear-ended, kind of random, right? We're just there and boom. And we were talking, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa. And I took a deep breath, and then I was like, okay, you okay? I'm okay. Driver, you okay? We worked through it. And she said to me later, she's like, I was about to freak out, but you didn't. So I didn't. And I was like, well, it wasn't a big deal. We were fine. We were fine. And we weren't going anywhere that was time sensitive. It's fine. But that's the type of awareness that you have as a figure skater. So one story, quick one that I can share is, so in skating, when you're doing your required elements, components of your competition, if you don't do a required element, that's an automatic deduction. Or, well, the scoring has changed a lot since my day, but I can speak to the experience that I have. So if you miss that required element, it's an automatic deduction. If you fall, automatic deduction. Now, if you fall on a required element, that's you're setting yourself up for the unlikelihood of being on the podium at the end. So what figure skaters do is we always have that backup plan. So it comes down to like, okay, if I was supposed to do my double Lutz, double toe combo at the beginning of my routine, and I got the double Lutz, but I didn't do the double toe component, I have to figure out how to throw that into the end of my routine. Otherwise, I have that automatic deduction. And when you're 12 or 13 years old and you're in the middle of a routine and you can move into that headspace where you go, all right, not a big deal, brush it off, keep going, got 2 more minutes of this program, and I'm going to put it in at the end. You've practiced that moment, you're ready for it. It becomes almost like a second nature to do it, but it's the repetition and the practice that gets you there. So when people throw things at me, I'd say my mom finds it a little infuriating. She'd be like, you're not upset. Da, da, da. I'm like, well, because I'm not going to resolve it if I get upset. Like if when I missed that double toe at the beginning of my routine, I was so flustered that I started to mess up everything in my routine, well, then I might as well just get off the ice. But I'm not going to. I'm going to stay on. I'm going to figure out a way to get through it. So, sports plays a huge role in for many of us in developing who we are and what we become. I wish I had had an opportunity to do team sports. I really didn't. it's something that I really wanted for my kids, and I wanted them to be able to experience the camaraderie and that approach of like, we win together, we lose together. But it's interesting because figure skating, as you said, it's been as it always is. It's one of the most popular sports in the Winter Olympics. It's always in the news. This particular Olympics, a lot of visibility has been around a doping scandal, but the story that I want to tell over and over and over is that we have 2 male ice dancers who are openly gay, who competed and won and spoke very beautifully about their journey, and who have partners on the ice who love them and partners off the ice who love them. And again, it's just on a global stage, being able to just be exactly who they are. That takes me back to when I was competing, and at the time I was competing, male figure skaters were told to be more masculine. And it was, I lost one of my closest friends to when he took his own life because he was uncomfortable with who he was and who he was as a male skater, and a gay male skater who couldn't be open about who he was and what his sexuality was. And so as I heard those stories, I was like, oh, I want to go give them hugs and just say, like, had you been around when my friend was competing in ice dancing back in the 80s, maybe my friend's still here today. And so it's another example of an international platform where, even though it has nothing to do with their skating, these skaters are beautiful skaters, but by inserting just even quietly something that can create hope for a young person, like, that's amazing.
I am obsessed with this topic that you've just brought up.
Yeah.
And it fits right into where I want to go next year. So, our mission at WINS is to have an influence on the trajectory of women to access and stay in the C-suite. Right now, it's about 21% of the C-suite in sports, in the business of sports, is women, which is very bleak, but growing. Okay, because as we all say and repeat over and over, if you can see it, you can be it. And to your point with that story, we're talking about an underrepresented population, right? And an underserved population. And certainly this, the theme that you've brought up with the visibility of, members of the LGBTQ community on the global stage with the Olympics plays right into it. The more comfortable we get with this, the more wonderful things can occur. And use the word hope, and it's heartbreaking, the story that you told. But that skater in some way had an influence on the fact that today, the skaters don't have to hide their true selves. And so I'll ask you, how does your work, or how do you believe that your work will continue to impact underrepresented populations and communities? And what needs to happen for more athletes, pro, college, at any level, corporations, brands, to have a real and sustainable social impact, in their communities, but also, in this underrepresented community, the LGBTQ community?
Well, the magic is in authenticity. So when I'm thinking about it from a corporate partnerships perspective, so I brought up Verizon with my 5G portable network here. One of my dear friends, he's an executive with Verizon, and we have talked so many times about how Verizon can provide, and this is not like a public service announcement here. I'm not paid by Verizon.
This interview is brought to you.
Yeah, but yes, Eric Fitzgerald Reed, terrific guy. But Eric and I have talked about, as they were rolling out the 5G network, what were some of the areas that they could address from a corporate social investment perspective. and how could they create momentum for under-resourced communities. And so we looked to partnerships with athletes who were doing great things in great communities where kids might choose to gather. So this example is Torrey Smith, who is a two-time Super Bowl champion, played for the Ravens, the Niners, the Eagles, and the Panthers. And he's a great guy, great dad. He decided with his wife, Chanel, to build a community center in the heart of Baltimore City. And Verizon was able to come in and provide some financial support, but also the infrastructure support so that this community center also has wicked fast, Wi-Fi. So when kids who wouldn't have the ability to do their homework at home can come, they're drawn there because not only can they do their homework, but they can also play games, relax, meet friends. And to me, that's an example of where you partner up. So, and then Tori's partnering up with a local Rex and Park department and community-based organizations. So Tori didn't create his own 501c3 nonprofit organization. He partnered with entities that are doing great work to amplify what they're doing. Verizon didn't launch their own nonprofit, nor did they go out and act as though they had all the answers. They partnered up with an athlete who could elevate and bring visibility to it, but also with the same community-based organizations that are on the ground and understand the needs of the community. And it's also solving an actual need. And that's really important, because if you go into a community and you don't listen and you tell them what they need, then you're probably going to miss the mark. But if instead, as my dear friend Eric did, he said, what is it that you need? What is it that this community needs? And how can we within our portfolio of products offer that? So to me, that's the future of this is I'll continue to matchmake. I'll continue to look for authentic partnerships. I will continue to discourage athletes from creating their own nonprofit organizations and instead leveraging organizations like Players Philanthropy Fund based in Baltimore or Giving Back Fund or others to create fiscal partnerships that enable them to go out and do the great work and elevate their voice without the legal headaches of creating their own nonprofit. And for people to just talk across previously impenetrable lines to say, what can I learn from you and why? And even though your background is very different than mine, what is it that we share in common and how can we continue to elevate those moments for others?
Yeah. So the authentic partnerships piece is big. And the other message I'm taking is, you don't need to create a nonprofit to have social impact. You just need to have a well thought out and well executed partnership, right? Which is sort of, that's what Oliver Rose is meant to create, on a couple of different scales. So again, you're all in on what you do. You're doing a fabulous job with everything that you're doing. There's too much to talk about. There's too big of a list to talk about, but we covered athletes' voices. We covered NIL, and I love all of your stories. And of course, your metaphors are always second to none. So finally, WINS was created to elevate the voices and the visibility of women in sports and entertainment across the media. And I always end these conversations with, what wins are you working toward right now, personally or professionally, and how can we help you get there?
So the first one, this is an easy question to answer, Amie. The first one is, I really want anybody who wants to participate in our certificate program in late April with Athletes' Voices to be able to join us, regardless of their earnings through sport. So we are looking for partners and underwriters to come in and sponsor participation in the program. So please send people to athletesvoices.org. They can learn more about the partnership opportunities that are out there, sponsor one of our webinars, sponsor a scholarship for an athlete. Really, they can come in at $2,500, $1,000, or $5 million, and then we'll have sustainability for the long term. but I don't want money to be a reason why somebody can't participate. So that's first. And that includes if they're in-kind support, like an airline company wanted to come in and say, we'll take care of getting Paralympic athletes who would like to join from Park City, Utah out to San Jose, California. That's a real need we have right now. So I'm interested in those types of partnerships as well. The other thing is, and Amie, you've been helping me with this, but I really, really need to write a book about all the things that my dad taught me while they're fresh. And I'm drawn towards it, but I have a really difficult time carving out the time and the space to make it happen. My dad used to always say, people have time and money for what's important to them. And just because somebody doesn't have time or money for you at this moment doesn't mean you aren't important. It just means that they haven't prioritized it. So I take my dad's words into this and say, I'm going to prioritize it this year and make sure that I start to put those words onto paper, because I learned so much from him, and I want others to be able to benefit from those teachings as well.
Yeah, I love that goal. I'm here cheering for you on that one, and everything that you're doing. Athletes' Voices, incredible. I love the call to action for brands, corporations to come in and support what you're doing there. That would be extremely impactful. And by the way, they'd be working with, the number one expert and how to actually have social impact. So we'll end there, but I want to thank you so much, Joanne, for your time today and, calling in from beautiful Tahoe. I hope you have a great rest of your stay, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Amie, and hope all remains well with you and your beautiful family as well.
Thank you.
Take care.